Hello, everyone.
Hey guys, on today's podcast, we're going to be talking all about taking charge of your relationship, taking charge of your wife, and how that can really change your relationship.
But before we do, as always, we'd like to ask you to like and subscribe. And remember, when you subscribe, it makes me smile. And so I know you all want to make me smile. And don't forget, down in the description, we've got links to our Patreon, where you'll find a lot of bonus content, access to this podcast in video, also access to our Discord community, where you can be a part of other people in domestic discipline relationship. And also, we have YouTube memberships now. So if you're not quite ready to jump on the Patreon bandwagon, check out our YouTube memberships. We'd love to have you be a part of that. You guys are just as important. So check all that stuff down in the description.
All right, guys. So this week, we wanted to dive into the topic of taking the authority in your relationship and really owning your authority as a head of household, really taking charge in your relationship, because for us, that was kind of the key element. That was kind of the missing link to where we were and where we really wanted to be. And something that we're kind of going through right now, kind of going through that process of getting closer to where we want to be. And this process of Coda assuming more authority, taking ownership of that authority, and exercising that authority really has been the driving force to getting us closer to that goal.
And you're right when you talk about lately, because it's not that our relationship has ever been bad, but it's only been recently, when I've decided to kind of take the bull by the horns, if you will, that we have really begun to thrive even more in our domestic discipline relationship, for sure.
Coda has always been the type of person, the type of leader that wants to kind of baby step into progress. He wants to see measurable change over time, but slow growth.
Mm-hmm.
That is something that he prefers. That's just his leadership style. Where I'm the type of person that I'm like, let's just jump right into the deep end. Even if we flounder a little bit, even if we have some setbacks, we'll figure it out and we'll get closer to our goal faster. And so that's just been kind of a challenge that we've had to work through, is those different styles of approaching change, of approaching growth. And so in the beginning, I think that Coda really, it's not that he never believed he had authority, and it's not that he never thought that he could take ownership of that authority. I think it's that he saw where we wanted to be and where we were, and decided to take small steps towards that goal rather than making too many changes at once.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of truth to what you just said. And also, it's not that I think these people were bad leaders, but I had some mentors that had very passive types of leadership. They were not necessarily terrible leaders, but I also look back now and go, okay, they definitely had a lot of improvement in the area of leadership. They weren't dynamic, great leaders. And one of the things that I've learned recently is that, I used to think to be a great dynamic leader, you have to be tyrannical. And what I'm realizing is that you don't have to be that in order to be a great dynamic leader. But what you don't want to be is a passive leader.
And that's true. You had very extreme examples in your own life where you were under the leadership of very tyrannical leaders. Mm-hmm. You were under the leadership of very passive leaders, and you didn't really have a good real life example to look up to and to emulate.
No, not at all.
And so recently we kind of hit a point of stagnation in our growth, I would say. Mm-hmm. And obviously, if you've been listening to the podcast for any length of time, if you are one of our patrons and have gotten the chance to get to know us through Discord, you'll know that Coda and I are very much like-minded in the fact that we're not satisfied with stagnation.
Right.
We definitely always want to be in the process of growing and developing as a couple, as individuals. And so when we hit that point of just kind of stagnation, I came to Coda and I was like, I don't know how to get out of this. Like, I don't know what I can do, and I need your help. And that's how I approached it, because I didn't want to try to evaluate his leadership, because I don't feel like that's my position. If he needs to evaluate his own leadership, then that's something that he needs to do. But I did feel like it was appropriate for me to go to him and say, I need help because I don't know what else I can do here. And then that got the conversation started. Mm-hmm. And what we really discovered is that one of the things that we really needed to have happen to propel that change is for Coda to kind of take the leadership that is his, take the authority that is his. And I think that sometimes a head of household can be cautious to not want to come off tyrannical, to not want to come off micromanaging. And so sometimes I think that they don't assume the authority that the taken in hand has agreed to give them. And that can really create setbacks in your relationship. And so by understanding where your authority actually is, assuming that authority and taking charge of the relationship and really leading the relationship in a stronger, more tangible way, that can really drive growth.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point. I was looking towards society too to try to figure out what normal relationships look like. And the fact is one of the reasons we started doing domestic discipline is it's that old saying that my father tried to teach me, which is if the popular crowd's doing it, it's probably the wrong thing to do. You want to find out what 90% of the people are doing and do the opposite. And that right there was a huge turning point for me to be able to say, you know what, yeah, I'm going to pursue the relationship that we want, not what anyone else is telling me the relationship should look like. And if my wife is okay and she was by telling me I want this in our relationship, then you know what, I'm gonna not be fearful to no longer just, again, take the bull by the horns and start on that process. What I realize is yeah, the way our relationship is set up, if I start to become tyrannical, if I start doing things that are clearly abusive or wrong, she will let me know about it and we will correct it. But I thought what is keeping us from going to the next level is I'm so afraid that I might get there that I'm not even willing to try to take more of an initiative. And what I found is that the more I took an initiative, I'm not being abusive, I'm not being tyrannical, but what I'm doing is I'm setting our relationship up for success. And what I'm finding is I'm becoming a better head of household, and therefore I think Aria would say she's become a better taken in hand because there's things that I've noticed that she's been able to let go, these responsibilities and these weights that she's been able to go, oh, okay, he has this now, and I don't have to worry about it. And so I've noticed some big drastic changes, but the biggest ones are the ones of gentleness and just more of that submission and just calmness and things that I didn't realize that maybe she was lacking a little bit before. But I definitely, now that they have come to the surface because I've taken on that role, I've really seen a huge change. Would you say that's exactly what you've been feeling?
Yeah, I definitely think that you worded that really well. I feel like since I can kind of rest in the knowledge that you are assuming that authority, that you are taking that lead, that I don't necessarily have to consciously or subconsciously worry about where we're going, what we're doing, what the next steps are, because I know that you are being very aware of those things, that you are taking that leadership, that you are taking that active role of leadership in our relationship. I can more easily follow your lead without having that weight of kind of trying to keep track of everything in my mind.
And so head of households, that's what I want you to really latch onto here, is learn from kind of the mistake that I had for a while. Being afraid to take leadership because you're afraid of things that might happen is not a good way to lead at all. And so what you have to do is a little bit throw caution to the wind. And what I mean is what I realize is that good leaders, they will lead without any apology. And then if they do mess up, they will apologize. But then they will say, okay, now I've apologized for that. Now we're going to continue to go in the direction that I said that we were going to go.
It's kind of the old adage of ask for forgiveness, not permission.
Yeah, that's right. That's a good way of saying it. Absolutely.
And I feel like before you really took ownership of your role as a head of household, before you really started taking the lead in our relationship, it was almost like you were trying to get my permission to lead.
Yeah, that's exactly what
you were checking in with me. You were trying to confirm with me that I was still okay with what was going on, that I was still okay. It was almost like, hey, you broke a rule and I feel like I need to punish you. Is that okay with you? You never worded it that way, but that was kind of the attitude.
Sure, absolutely, absolutely.
And so what you really need to do is ask for forgiveness, not permission.
Right.
Because 9 times out of 10, you don't even need to ask for forgiveness. 9 times out of 10, your decisions are right. They are good.
That's a good point.
And that way it's not this like, because when you were like having that attitude of asking for my permission every step of the way, it felt like that just puts a lot of burden of responsibility onto me that doesn't belong to me. That is the head of household role. And when you're like, hey, is this okay with you? Or, do you still agree with this? Again, you weren't using those words, but that was kind of the attitude you were coming at it with. when you do that, it's like, man, I have to hold the weight of for overseeing our relationship and making sure that everything's okay because he's asking for my input on everything. That's not to say that you should never ask for your taken in hands
Sure.
input at all.
Sure.
But once things have been established, once they've been agreed upon, you really do need to just act in that agreed upon role.
And that's the key piece there is one of the things that I kept forgetting was, and this is what I was worried about was, well, I don't want to be tyrannical. I don't want to be abusive. But what I realized is that a lot of the things that I was equating with that, she had already given me permission to do. Now, I'm not saying she gave me permission to abuse her, but what I mean is some of the things that was stuck in my head, like, is this okay if I do X? Is this okay if I believe X? She had given me permission to do that. And so once I had this light bulb moment that seems obvious, once I had that light bulb go off, I realized, oh, I don't have to be fearful. She's given me permission for that. And since she has, yeah, 9 times out of 10, it probably is going to turn out okay.
And I want to just retract a word that you kept using over and over and over again. I did not give him permission to do anything. Because that I do not have the authority to grant permission. I gave him confirmation.
Well, that's what I mean,
of
right?
my participation.
What I meant by that is that when you're negotiating, when you're first doing your domestic discipline relationship, and you're sitting down and you're making sure that the right rules get into place and all of that kind of stuff, that's when certain things are agreed upon. There is an agreement that happens, and so that's what I was trying to say is that when we had agreed upon how the relationship was going to go, I had to realize, oh, we've already agreed on the terms. I don't have to keep going back again to the drawing board
and get that confirmation.
And get that confirmation. And if I happen to mess up, then I can apologize and we can move on. But otherwise, I do need to lead confidently. I do need to make the decision. And I'm just going to say, this is the way we're going to go. And what I've realized too is the moments that were uncomfortable, the moments where I felt like I feel like I need to ask for permission, were those moments where she would say now, she's not necessarily happy. Maybe she's not happy with the decision that I made, or she doesn't think she needs to be punished or corrected or any of those kind of things. And before it was kind of like, well, maybe I am making the wrong decision. And now I'm just like, no, this is the decision I made. We're going to do that. And I think that has helped you a little bit too, as the taken in hand, to know that I'm just following through with stuff now.
It has. I just wanted to kind of word correct there because I know people.
No, I appreciate that. Yeah.
I just didn't want people to like latch on and be like, see, I knew she was really
No. And again, I used the wrong word, but I appreciate that you made that, because I don't want to misconstrue anything that we're saying. But the biggest thing I want you to take away, head of households, is that the agreements have been made, so go forward with that.
And I was just going to say, I don't think that, do I agree with every decision you ever make?
Of course not. That wouldn't, no.
Not necessarily, but I agree with most of them because we have been married long enough that we have grown in our relationship to the point where we are very like-minded in how we approach things. I don't adamantly disagree with you very often. And so having to kind of correct my thinking or accept a decision that I don't like, that doesn't happen as often as you would think. And so
I would agree with that.
But me getting like, even when I have gotten upset, and I'm just using upset as like an umbrella term because it's not that I was angry, it's not that I was argumentative or anything, but when I've gotten upset at the prospect of being punished, it was more of kind of like, I'm upset that I made that. It was more of like I was upset about, like, I was upset with myself, and you took that as being upset with your decision.
Yes, right, exactly.
That was kind of a miscommunication, because it's not that I was disagreeing with the punishment. It's not that I was refusing the punishment. It was more of like, I made a mistake, and I know I made a mistake, and I'm disappointed in myself. I'm upset with myself. I'm sad that I disappointed my head of household, that I didn't live up to the standard. And so that would bring a certain level of, maybe being a little bit more melancholy, maybe showing signs of just being sad, maybe kind of tearing up. And you took that as me being upset with you and your decision to punish me.
Right. And it made me second guess.
Right. And so that was a miscommunication that we had to work out, because I was never upset with you for your decision to punish me, but I can see how you thought that.
And that's why I finally had to just say, look, you got to just make the decisions and go for them. And again, if you mess it up, You apologize and you move forward. And yeah, leaders are going to mess up. Leaders are going to apologize, are going to have to apologize. But the best leaders do that, and then they move forward. And we've talked a lot about, to help the head of households especially, about making decisions and sticking with it and taking charge. And that's good. But one of the things that I can already see that potentially is going to happen, maybe even in the comments, is, well, this already seems, just from what you're talking about, this seems tyrannical. This seems like a dictatorship. But do not mistake the head of household taking the leadership role and putting things in order as a devalue of the taken in hand. We've talked a lot about this in past podcasts, but I feel the need to say it because there's some that still don't hear it. This has nothing to do with the value of people. People are valuable no matter where they sit in the relationship and where they sit in the quote unquote hierarchy. But this has to do with order. And in order for things to run properly, to have harmony, to have peace, to have all the things that we talk about, you have to have order. So our relationships, our domestic discipline relationships, are structured in such a way where the order is, the head of household is in fact that. He is the head, and he is the one making the decisions, and he will decide what is a rule break and what is not. And the taken in hands are going to suffer consequences for disobeying those rules and are told, yes, this is where the fence is and you are to not go outside of it. That doesn't devalue her and it doesn't give more value to him, but it's an order that exists in order to have a good, harmonious, loving relationship.
So we've talked a lot about why a head of household wants to take charge and why that helps the relationship. But how does a head of household really assume that authority and take charge of the relationship?
The way he does it is really by making the decision. I know that's going to sound like, well, that's too easy. I mean, that sounds very easy, but it really is easy. It's just not simple to do that.
I feel like one of the things that we had to do was that we had to reevaluate the entire way we set up our relationship and kind of throw out some old systems that were no longer serving our relationship.
That's true.
And so rather than have a laundry list of rules, we kind of threw that system out.
Yeah.
Now, do we still have standards? Absolutely. Are there still things from that old rule list that are expectations that I know still stand?
Absolutely.
Yeah. But to an extent, we threw out this concept of having a very pre-negotiated what is a rule, what is not a rule, what constitutes breaking that rule. Now it's kind of all up to Coda's discretion.
It really is. Yeah.
We talked about how, one of the values of our relationship is that I am responsible, that I fulfill my responsibilities. And so now Coda can look at a situation and say, I don't think you're acting very responsibly here, and this is why. So therefore you are going to be punished or corrected, or you are going to have this consequence or this outcome because I want you to act more responsibly, and you didn't. And so it's kind of at his discretion. It's not a list of rules, because while that served us well in the beginning, we got to a point where that was very limiting to his authority and his ability to lead our house.
Yeah, because my mind was, I already have a cluttered mind to begin with, and a lot of those rules, it just cluttered everything up and everything. And so it made things difficult. And so one of the things we did is like she said, we simplified our relationship. And essentially we just said, okay, we've talked about you leading and talk about you kind of having the keys to the kingdom, if you will, but you have them now. But when I went back to saying you have to make the decision, just because you have the keys, you have to make the decision to use them. And that's where I thought I was making the decisions to use them, but really it was like, oh no, I have these, I just have chosen not to use them. And so once you have that in place, your job is to make the decision, okay, I'm gonna do it.
So I think one of the things that was helpful for us in that process is a couple weeks ago I came to Coda and I asked him, just so that he could gain insight into where I was at and what my mind frame was at in this whole thing, if he thought it would be helpful for me to write out what I believed the expectations of our relationship to be. And so what that meant is that not that I was writing out things that were going to be adapted into rules, but more of, hey, this is what I think you expect of me. And because we were having a lot of like lost in translation or miscommunication around, I would do a lot of things that I felt did not live up to expectations. And then they weren't being punished or they weren't even being addressed.
Right.
And I was like, okay, well, is that an expectation? I thought it was. And so me kind of coming to him and saying, hey, I know that you expect me to be respectful to you. This is what I think respect looks like, And so I wrote out a list of like, and I mean, it was like a page for just what does respecting you look like in our day-to-day life.
It was thorough.
Yes, I tried to be very thorough because I wanted him to see like, this is what I think that I'm supposed to be doing here. He read it and I think that at first he was overwhelmed from the standpoint of he's like, you don't think that this is like too much? I was like, but if you hold the standard that I'm supposed to respect you, what on this list wouldn't fit into that? Like,
it really wasn't that it was too much. It was, I didn't realize, we've talked a lot about this, and this is actually what has helped us recently. It was all the little details of things. It was all the things that I would have thought, maybe this makes me a micromanager. And what I realized is that no, these are all the little things that were actually hurting our relationship because I wasn't paying attention to the little tiny details, the little things that she needs me to point out to say, hey, I think that's the way you just talked to me. That's a violation of respect, because I don't know if you realized it, but that wasn't a very kind way to speak about it. That's just as an example. And so it was just lists that I realized, oh, it's just the little tiny things that I've been letting slide that I actually didn't realize were the problem. But as you know, the little things that you let slide, the little problems, they eventually stack up to be a big problem. And that's what was happening in our relationship.
And I think that that's the thing that we've talked about before. Coda and I have talked about privately as well as on the podcast about the concept of pillars of expectations of the relationship. And we've talked about what are the pillars in our own relationship. And when we talked about that, that all sounds really good, but it's very abstract until you break down, what does that really mean? What does that really look like? And I think by giving that very thorough list of what I feel like it means to respect him, I think that gave him the perspective of like, oh, that means that she's asking me to hold the standard in every area, not just the things that we've talked about.
Not just the big things.
Yeah, and in the small everyday moments, because that's the make or break for our relationship.
Yep.
And so I think assuming your authority as a head of household means that you take charge of calling out your taken in hand for the little things. And it doesn't always have to be a punishment. It doesn't always have to be a lecture. It doesn't always have to be a verbal warning. It can be as simple as like, hey, watch your tone right now because you're getting a little snippy at me, or you're getting a little disrespectful, or I don't appreciate the way you're talking to me. That can be it.
That's right.
And how she responds to that really determines the next steps, right?
Right, exactly.
But you don't have to jump to, hey, I didn't like how you said that. We're going to do a punishment. Could that be appropriate sometimes? Sure.
Depends.
But it doesn't always have to go there right away. So really understanding your authority means that you have the authority to kind of evaluate and determine how to handle the little everyday moments.
And that's the thing. That's really what we mean when we're saying, take charge of being the head of household, take charge of your wife. And what that means is that she needs you to pay attention to the little details. It's the little details that I didn't even realize, that potentially we didn't realize. That's really what gets your relationship into trouble. And so you may think, well, but that seems overwhelming. Like, how do I worry about all the little details? You actually don't have to remember them all. It really comes down to, as I said, making the choice. And that means that what you realize when you make the choice to say, okay, I am leading even in the little details, you'll know when they come up. I thought, oh man, there's no way I'm going to remember this. No, you know when they come up. You know when it's a situation where you go, I got to take charge here, or I have to correct here, or whatever it is. They will come up and they will stare. It's amazing. All I can tell you is that I didn't realize they were staring me in the face till I made the decision to say I'm going to lead in the little things, and now I can see when they're staring at me in the face. It's like waking up and being able to hear for the first time. It's very strange.
And for Coda to say that, that it's not going to be as hard of a transition as you think.
No, it really isn't.
Because one of Coda's struggles just as a husband in general is that he is not the most observant person. He's just not the most observant husband. He really gets into routines. He gets very much on autopilot. And so for him to say, hey, once I made the decision to manage my wife in those little everyday moments, I was able to see where I needed to step in. If he can see it, anybody can.
Absolutely. No, that's true. And that's exactly what I would tell you, is that if you're feeling like, I don't think I can do this, trust me, this is one of those situations where I go, look, if I can start seeing it, you can start seeing it. Absolutely.
And then just making those decisions and sticking to them.
That's it.
So just make the decision that you are going to lead. Understand that you have the authority to extend into those areas. Notice when you need to step in, and then make a decision and follow through.
And when we say that 9 times out of 10, you're probably making the right decision, the same thing I just said earlier, when I made the decision to lead, even in the little things, and things started popping out at me that I'd never seen before, the decisions I've made so far, and I hope you would agree with this, Arya, I think I've made some pretty darn good decisions. And 9 times out of 10, I made the right ones. I just did.
Yeah.
And it's just interesting because I thought, there's no way I'm going to bat 1,000 like that. Yeah, I have. I've made the right decisions.
That's not to say that it hasn't come with its own learning curve.
Oh, sure.
But yeah, you've made really good decisions for us and for our family, and it's been really easy to follow your lead.
And you have told me yourself, you didn't say it in these exact words, but that you've kind of been able to breathe a sigh of relief, and you've been able to kind of be yourself, or be the person that you were always meant to be, because you're not having to be. And I love that you use this, that you didn't have to be in your masculine energy. You could be in the feminine energy. And you know what? Whether people agree with this or not, I'm just going to say it. That's the way it needs to be. She needs to be in the feminine energy. He needs to be in the masculine energy, because that's the way it's designed. That's the way it's supposed to work. And that, to me, is the success behind a good domestic discipline relationship.
All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed this conversation. Hope you got something out of it. Definitely let us know what you think down below, and we will talk to you next time.
See ya.